everyone. It's time to take a ride on the L train. I'm your host, Scott Rubin. I'm a licensed associate real estate broker with Compass in New York City, selling residential real estate in Manhattan and Brooklyn since 2005. Today on the podcast, we're going to talk about how insane the rental market is right now. It is completely off the wall, and I'm excited to tell you all about it. So let's get started and stand clear of the closing doors, please. Okay, so let's begin. The reason I wanted to do this episode is that the rental market right now in late 2021 is absolutely insane. It's been like this for a while too, and I was going to do an earlier episode about this, but I just assumed that by the holidays it would have cooled off. But it hasn't, and it's not that much of a surprise because whenever the rental market or the sales market has an unusually busy year, it carries over into what's typically the off season. So you'll see the holidays, the whole winter. It may be very active. And before I get into the nuts and bolts of things, I just want to explain what's happening now, and then after that, I'll explain why. Throughout the summer of 2021 and continuing into the fall and probably through the winter, what I've been seeing is every time I list an apartment for rent, I work for landlords, not tenants, so I'll list an apartment for rent. My inbox will immediately get flooded with emails. I'll be able to set maybe 1 or 2 open house dates and schedule as many appointments as I possibly can for those 1 or 2 days. I'll get multiple applications and I'll rent the apartment almost immediately. There is an extreme amount of demand right now. If you're a tenant, you probably realize this, and you realize that it's very difficult and it's a very challenging, competitive market. It's not all bad. There are definitely some positives compared to years that I've seen that were even worse than this. It's just very competitive. Anything decent that pops on the market gets snatched up almost immediately, and it's just insane. Okay, so let's consider why this is happening. If you go back to 2020, in March, we were locked down. We weren't permitted to show apartments until about June, I would say June 24th, 2020. The market opened back up, but it was very hard to rent an apartment. Most of the properties that I had were just sitting there, and I'd shown it a lot. I mean, there were people looking at apartments, but they weren't really pulling the trigger. People seemed to have all the time in the world, and they were waiting, and the prices kept coming down. We had to lower prices to get somebody in the door because the last thing you want is a vacant apartment sitting there from month to month where you could be collecting rent. So landlords were forced to lower rents, pay concessions such as free month's rent, pay the broker fee. So the landlords started paying our commission for pretty much every listing. I don't think I've collected a commission from the tenant since right before the pandemic, since March 2020. So the landscape really changed, and it became an extreme tenants market, and they held all the cards. And sometime, I don't know, I don't know exactly when it happened, but sometime in 2021, things really changed. Employers must have been bringing their employees back because, think about it. I mean, these people, the renters are the ones that left the city the fastest, because why would they be paying some of the highest rents in the entire country to work at a job that they no longer need to commute to? So everyone really left all these apartments, and the ones that intended to live in New York City were kind of waiting it out and trying to find the right deal for them. But employers must be bringing their employees back in record numbers because everybody's coming back at once. So in 2021, it's been extremely different. I've even developed a system where when I get a new listing, I know it's going to get a tremendous amount of activity. So I'll arrange with the tenant, the existing tenant, maybe a couple of days where we can have open houses. I arrange my appointments in Calendly so people can just schedule them themselves within the time limit. I answer whatever questions I can, and I typically book the entire open house. I'll do an hour, maybe 2 hours one day, and then if needed, an hour to 2, the following day. And that's all it takes. We'll get multiple applications. People understand how competitive it is. They're very aware that they have all their paperwork ready. There's people ready to jump on it. Some people have lost several apartments already, and they're just ready to go. And that's the kind of market we're in right now. Now, I'd say if there's anything positive to take away from this is that you can still find a lot of the inventory to be no fee or no broker commission. And that's what makes this different than years where we had an extreme landlord's market, but everybody was paying broker fees upwards of 15% of the first year's rent. And I think a big part of that reason is that pre-pandemic, early 2020, this crazy thing happened where all of a sudden we all saw this news headline that brokers were no longer allowed to charge commission, or to tenants rather. We were allowed to only bill the landlord, which is crazy because, for the most part, the tenant would usually pay the fee. And it was something that just kind of came out of nowhere. It was, I believe it was a law that came out in 2019 that was completely misinterpreted, but for some reason it was enforced for about 1 week or so. We were all told that we weren't allowed to charge commissions for about a week. Then the powers that be intervened. There was a court date set and the pandemic happened. I know that was postponed. I'm not sure exactly how that ended, but it's been a while now and we are allowed to charge commission, but it kind of became the norm. Landlords and their brokers talked and a lot of them decided to charge a little more for the rent and, build the commission into the rent and do it that way. But then the pandemic happened on top of that, and landlords couldn't give they could give apartments away, but landlords had to, give a lot away to get tenants in. And part of that was keeping the no fee thing going. And, since it's been so long, it seems that even though it's very difficult for tenants to compete in this market, apartments come and go in a day and you have to jump on everything. When I do my assessment, or the last few assessments I've done, and this is both in Williamsburg, Upper East Side, Gramercy, those were my most recent rental deals. When I did a report for the landlords, at least 90% of the competing inventory was not charging a commission to the tenants. So we still had to go no fee in order to be competitive. So that's one of the things. That's, I guess, one of the, silver linings is that you can probably get away without paying a commission. But, depending on how long this goes and how low the inventory goes. Because back when I started in the business, the inventory was consistently less than 1%. And I'm not sure what that figure is at the time of this recording. I'm just basically recording on what I see out there. But if the vacancy rate is low enough, you can probably expect that to swing in the other direction. Or maybe not. Maybe the culture just changed so much that most people are just going the no fee route. But I guess, that remains to be seen. Now, this is an area, rentals, where I only work with landlords nowadays. Since maybe about 2012, I started working only with landlords and no longer with tenants. However, I'm always happy to advise. I'd say if I can give any advice, it's to have all of your paperwork ready, like your letter of employment and tax returns and bank statements. Just have you can actually go on my website, scott.rubin.com, and there's a whole section of education where I have videos, and one of them talks about the rental process. But definitely have all of your paperwork ready. Make sure that you earn 40 times the rent and you have good credit. And if not, you may need a guarantor or one of these insurance type guarantee companies. You just want to be prepared before going in there and really try and jump on these listings the moment they come out and see them right away. Be the first, to get in if you can. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm going to keep this one short. And yeah. Okay, that wraps up this episode of the L Train podcast. I'm Scott Rubin, licensed associate real estate broker with Compass. All views expressed in this podcast are my own. I've been selling real estate in Manhattan and Brooklyn since January 25th, 2005. And if you or anyone you know are looking to buy a home, sell a home, or are a landlord looking to rent out their home, please contact me. Thank you so much for listening and hope to talk to you soon.